Hey, welcome back to the follow-up video on this Magna drill press. Just to catch up real quickly, if you don't know, these follow-up videos are to answer your Q&As and to give me a chance to explain myself, in some cases, to fill in some voids that I left behind, and I have a couple of those in this video. These videos are live here on YouTube for about a week, then they become channel member only content over at mygrowthrings.com. So let's get to your questions, comments, and cheap shots, shall we? Charles was interested in the stand that I'm using here, which is what Shopsmith sold as an SPT, special purpose tool stand, and it was created to hold those accessories back here on the shelf. Charles was wondering if it was still available and which accessories it could power. That's an interesting question. Actually, there are now, I believe, two versions of the stand available today. There's the version I'm using here, and then you can add to that extensions to the legs. That's something relatively new from Shopsmith that allows you to get the height up. Now here, I do have a question. I went to their website, which you may know is in transition, and so I didn't get exactly the answer I wanted, because as you extend the legs, because those legs are tapered, they get further apart. I'm not sure how the caster set that they sell for that would work with the extensions on it. So that's a question for Shopsmith on that. But yes, these are available. You can purchase them with the belt and pulley configuration to power the jointer, the belt sander, the strip sander, the jigsaw, the scroll saw, the band saw, and there may be even more I'm not thinking of. So yeah, still available at shopsmith.com. John asked if it was an illusion or was the quill spinning backwards. It's an illusion. The way these cameras work is they sometimes make things appear to run backwards. We've all seen it on car commercials where it looks like the wheels on a car are spinning backwards as they travel forward. It's just a matter of frame rate. So yeah, a little bit of an illusion. Idaho Wagoneers says there's so much history attached to the Shopsmith. Thanks for sharing. Great information. What other brands spun off of the Shopsmith idea? Okay, there's like two paths we can go down. There was the very early days of the product that was being manufactured by Magna Engineering that we talked about, and Magna Engineering also was producing products for Montgomery Wards under the Powr-Kraft brand. And so they had their own jointer, their own scroll saw, there are several table saws, the drill press, and so on. But those were being manufactured by Magna, the same company, the same factory that was producing the Mark V by the 1950s. Shopsmith Incorporated in the 1980s purchased a line of tools from McGraw-Edison is the name of the company, and they were making a line called Benchcraft tools. Shopsmith purchased that company and introduced the line Shopcraft, and these are benchtop tools, and kind of like what Magna did in the early days when they started producing the Magna line, is that they were making tools. They figure, all right, you've decided not to go down the Shopsmith path. You don't want to go with multi-purpose tool. You want individual tools. Great. We'll get your money too. But they were selling these little benchtop tools. And there was a belt sander and a grinder and a three-wheel bandsaw. My dad actually owns one of those. I own one of the grinders. And I got that, and my dad got that, not even knowing the Shopsmith history of it. They just were early tools that we purchased. But that company was eventually spun off and sold to another company. Now, interestingly, those products were made in Missouri, and some of them were imported from Taiwan eventually. The company eventually found itself back in Dayton, Ohio, under the brand name Aspen Tools. And I actually visited their warehouse as they were going out of business, selling off all of their supplies. So yeah, that line right there, the Shopcraft tool line, was one that came and went. Mark said he thought that this tube, that I was questioning whether or not it was the size of the Shopsmith tubes, he said he thought it looked like something in between the old 10ER, the very earliest machine, or maybe even the tube that was used on the overhead pin router. The router system has a very large tube, so quite a bit larger than this. I measured it. This one's 2 inches in diameter. You're right, the Mark V tubes are 1.75 inches, so it's definitely larger. I mentioned that Magna was making this machine under the Powr-Kraft brand as well. And since we last spoke, I did a little more digging, and I found out that they're similar, but not exactly the same. Now, the nameplate is different. That's one giveaway. But the two biggest differences have to do with the table. Really, I guess there's three differences that have to do with the table. The first one is this table right here is 10 inches by 10 inches square. The Powr-Kraft is 8 by 8. This one has parallel grooves machined into the table, through the table, in fact, while the Powr-Kraft has probably the more common, more traditional sort of X shape or cross slots that run from one corner to the other. But the other big difference is, and I guess Magna saved this for themselves, is with this machine, I can pull a pin down below the table and I can rotate this table to drill different angles. Now, once it gets into the proper position, you then tighten it with a wrench. The Powr-Kraft version of this does not have a tilting table. It's just a one-piece casting. So this additional complexity is part of what weighs in on making these different. Everything else about these appear to be the same as far as the stroke, which is 3 inches, and the number of bearings in the quill, which are 2, and so on. Now I want to pull this quill out. When we were last together, I had about 3/4 inch of movement on it. Since then, I've worked on it a little bit. I also have removed a pin that retains it. There's a little roll pin that's normally here at the top. And then something else about this is I mentioned that we have the ability to lock the quill at different depths. And I was concerned about that because, having something jamming into the side of that quill shaft is eventually going to cause a burr. Now, the way that they did this on the Mark V is there's actually a keyway, a groove cut into the quill, and there's a little, it's a set screw with a tip on it or a boss that runs in the groove and helps to keep everything properly aligned. So as I was cleaning this up and backing this off, I came to the realization that this also has a keyway, but the keyway is machined into the side. So let's pull this thing out and take a look at it. And it's still incredibly stiff. We are getting close here to where it's about to leave the pinion. So let me grab it. Oh, golly. Oh my gosh. Feels like we are past. Yeah, here we go. Here we go. You just have to want it bad enough. Oh, that's interesting. All right, so there's the hole where I removed the roll pin that was retaining it. And this is the opposite side of where the rack teeth are cut. And there you can see we've got our keyway that the little stop is running in. Look at that. It's machined so far. The diameter of this is machined so far out to allow for that last ball bearing to fit in there, I suppose, or maybe it's to allow the drive to fit down in here. Anyway, machined such a big diameter that we're actually cut through the bottom of those. I was thinking that maybe I would see some buildup or something pressed into one of those, but I don't see it. Plenty of gunk in there. And, this should have been adding spring tension as I was driving that down. That spring should have wanted to snap this back. And it is just tight as a drum. So that's going to require some attention and some soaking. But all this will come apart and we'll get all this cleaned up. Now, one of the things I said in the last video but forgot to follow up on is how this machine wasn't properly set up in the first place. And how did I know that? Well, I read the manual, and one of the things that it called out in the parts breakout was that there were a couple pieces of hardware that the owner would need to purchase locally. And one of those is, if we pivot down here, notice where this column, I keep calling it a tube on a drill press, it's a column, passes through the headstock. You can see there is a head of a bolt right there. This entire thing is supposed to be up and level with the top of the column, and the owner of this is supposed to purchase a washer and a bolt to pass through here so that the head of that washer, or the washer and the head of the bolt, would rest on top of the column. If you were ever then to loosen the headstock, say for example, you wanted to pivot this thing around, as I said that you could do, where you could swing it off to the backside, you don't have the headstock slipping down. Right now, if I were to loosen that, well, there's enough rust there to stop it. But if that column were rust free, if I loosen that headstock lock, it's just going to drop, and I need to fix that. Something that was clearly missing. So I got a heads up from a gentleman named John Dalton. John is a collector of Shopsmith memorabilia, and in fact was very instrumental in operating the first two get-togethers that took place in Dayton a year or two ago. John gave me a heads up that one of the Powr-Kraft versions of this drill press is currently for sale in Yuma, Arizona. $50 is what they're asking. It looks like it's in really good shape. So if you're anywhere near there, I would suggest you jump on that. I believe it was on Facebook Marketplace. Which reminds me, I want to give you one more thing that I need a heads up on. The paint that I'm looking for to redo this was produced by Rust-Oleum, and it's no longer available. And I keep checking the shelves of all the old local hardware stores around, hoping I could find some. I did find some in the wrong color today, so I know that I'm targeting the right place. But what I'm looking for is the Rust-Oleum hammered Verde green. And yes, I know that that's redundant because the word verde means green, or some would say the word green means verde, but they called it Verde green. So the Rust-Oleum hammered Verde green. I would love a can of that because it's a great match for the old Magna colors, and it's, like I say, been discontinued. So if you happen to check out your local hardware store and you see some new old stock of Rust-Oleum sitting on the shelf with a layer of dust on it, check it out, and I would be more than happy to purchase it. Now, currently, there's somebody on eBay selling them for like $79 a can, and you know, I admit I'm tempted, but I ask you first. All right, that's it. Make it a great day. Hey, welcome back to the midweek follow. Midweek, there's no habit. Um, Idaho, Idaho Wagoneers says there's so much hickory. Gosh, someone's dyslexic.